We have to promote human solidarity, avoid indifference, and play a part with society in the solution of the problem of violence. India is considered to be one of the world's most dangerous countries for sexual violence against women. We, the students from the Department of Social Work, Krista Jayanti College, Bangalore, as part of our correctional social work paper, is here to sensitize the community on the atrocities against women. Hope this video gives you a tiny glimpse on what atrocities against women means to each one of us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I am Anup Kurian and this is my friend Anu Abraham. We are from 2nd MSW Christianity College, Autonomous Bangalore. Today we are going to discuss something about the most painful and brutal activity that is happening still in the world, that is FGM, that is female genital mutilation. Now Anu Abraham is going to speak something about FGM, that is female genital mutilation.
Yes, FGM or female genital mutilation. How many of you are aware about the particular practice? I think only few are aware. But what is FGM? It is basically the practice of removing the external genitalia from a female body non-medically. And it is practiced all over the world. As human beings, we can imagine how much painful it will be when we put knife on that much sensitive areas of human body. And there are several types of FGM practiced all over the world. We can take a few glances into those. This is the female external genitalia. This is clitoris, this is outer labia, this is urethral opening, this is inner labia, this is vaginal opening. And in type 1 FGM, they cut the clitoris from female genitalia, and in type 2, they are cutting both clitoris and inner labia, and in type 3, they are cutting all the clitoris, outer labia and inner labia, and they fuse them together and only leaves a small opening for vagina in the third type. And in the fourth type, they are burning, pricking or piercing clitoris, outer labia or inner labia. These are the 4 types, and among this, type 3 is the most dangerous and risky one. And coming back, we can discuss the statistics of FGM in all over the world, and it is quite shocking. 200 million are undergone FGM till now, and 3 million women are at risk of undergoing this FGM practice. And this is majorly practiced in girls who are between 4 to 12 years. And it is prevailing in 30 countries, mainly in Africa, Middle East and Asia. And in India, the government says there is no data to support the existence of FGM, but studies reveal that around 75% of women in a certain community practiced FGM till now. Then, coming to the health hazards related to FGM, there are several health hazards which includes severe bleeding, complications in childbirth, problems in urinating, menstruating and having sex, and also includes mental health issues, and it can even lead to death. And coming to the reasons of FGM, and it includes socio-cultural reasons, health and hygienic reasons, spiritual and religious reasons, and psychosexual reasons. In general, it is practiced for ensuring the virginity of female and also to control or eliminate the sexual stimulation in females. And it is a clear-cut violence of human rights, and it is categorized under child abuse, sexual assault against women and children. And this is a practice that is very evil and should be eliminated from the world.
Thank you, Anu, for the inspiring class. So, as a social worker, we are supposed to think about how to stop this brutal practice, FGM, the female genital mutilation. It is very easy to say that educating the woman or educating the citizen or the community is the way to reduce or stop the FGM. But the thing is, the reality is, they are educated. The educated members also doing the same. is because of the practice or culture. No, we can't stop with educating or doing something. But the thing what we are supposed to do to pressurize the government to it's our duty to pressurize the government to create act against the female genital mutilation. As a collective, is our collective responsibility to do this for the society, for the good of the state and good of the, especially good of the female friends. Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is Robin and this is Leonora, and we'll be talking about premarital abortion. So abortion basically refers to a deliberate termination of pregnancy, and it usually happens in the first 28 weeks of pregnancy. So while unsafe abortions continue to remain a challenge, the regional STD training and research center has noticed an upward trend of adolescent girls who are unmarried approaching for abortion. So abortion increases vulnerability towards STD, HIV, AIDS and cervical cancer. And in the study conducted by STD Teaching, Training and Research Center, it was found out that 3% of the respondents wanted to continue the relationship after abortion, and which leads to an unending cycle of abortion. Now Lenora would be talking about the laws.
So now the laws in relation to abortion in India, the Shah Committee was appointed by the Government of India and carried out a comprehensive review of social, cultural, legal as well as medical aspects of abortion, and in the year 1966 recommended legalizing abortion, and then in the year 1971 medical termination of pregnancy was passed in the parliament. Now we look at a case study in relation to abortion. So there was an 18-year-old girl in Africa, and she had a lot of vaginal bleeding. So the nearest clinic was 7 to 8 kilometers, and by that, and she wanted to abort the child as well. But out of fear of talking to the doctors and also the distance, she inserted 3 tablets in her vagina, and by the time she could reach the hospital, she was pronounced dead. So in this case study, you can see the physical effects, the lack of resources, as well as the psychological effects. Now Robin will talk about the physical effects of abortion.
So the physical effects of abortions include damage to womb or cervix, excessive bleeding, infection on the uterus or the fallopian tube, septic shock or even death. Now Lenora would be talking about the psychological.
So the most common psychological effects include attempted suicide, depression, anxiety, PTSD, etc. And these symptoms and many more symptoms can be seen anywhere between 4 months to 1 year of the abortion procedure, once the abortion procedure is completed. To conclude, the UNCRC in its 4 basic principles talks about the right to life, survival and development. And as mentioned, the right to life, survival and development is extremely crucial, and abortion contradicts these very principles.
Therefore, as social workers, our role is in creating awareness about abortion, its physical effects, mental effects, and about the contraception, and about the legal issues related to abortions.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Wancha, I'm Ms. Judy. We're going to present our take on rape. What do you think rape is? Rape is a type of sexual assault which may occur, or anything which is sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual penetration without the consent of the person. And India has been the 4th largest. Can you cut that part? Rape is the 4th most common crime in India against women, and there have been rape cases reported daily in the 2019 report. What about the years 2020-21? There hasn't been such a report yet. What about the cases which haven't been reported, or the untold cases, untold stories of people who have been raped? So, what I think about rape is it's not what a woman wears or how she walks or how she talks, what does she do, her lifestyle. It's not that. It all depends on the mindset of the person, or the mindset of men actually. Because men sometimes look at women as objects, and they shouldn't do that. So it all depends on his mindset. So proper sensitization should be needed for men, which is a must. And Jyoti will be talking about a case study.
Now I'll be telling you about the case study in UP that happened in 2005. So Imrana, a lady in the family, was brutally raped by her father-in-law and Panchayat registered it under the case of adultery. So after a lot of social media attention, Imrana got justice, but then she later had to consider her father-in-law as her husband and had to leave her original husband. So this is something that was very wrong and happened in a brutal manner. So we as a social workers have come up with 3 interventions that we can do against rape. The first one is gender sensitization. As my friend mentioned, it should not only be for men and boys, but especially for women, girls. In fact, all the genders and all the age groups should be considered for sensitization. The second one is individual counseling for the rapists as well as victims, because they have to get out of the trauma and eventually be cured from it. And the last intervention that we have is increasing the quality of life of the family members, particularly in this case, so that they understand their roles towards their family and take up their responsibility without deviating in any other ways. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone. Myself Dijal Maria Saji. She is Shemi Saji. We are second year MSW students from Christy Jain College, Bangalore. Here we are going to discuss about child marriage. Over to Shemi Saji.
Starting with a quote, educating girls is one of the most powerful tools to prevent child marriage. What is child marriage? Child marriage is defined as the marriage of a girl below the age of 18 and the marriage of a boy below the age of 21. The highest child marriage happening in the world is Niger, and the highest child marriage happening in India is Bengal. The main causes of child marriage is it include poverty, bride price, dowry, cultural tradition, religious and social pressure, and regional custom. Over to Gigi.
Now let's look into the solutions to our child marriage. International Center for Research and Women introduced some policies to prevent child marriage. First one is empowerment policies for girls' education, and second thing is to enhance girl access to high quality education. Now let's have a look into a case of a child marriage victim. Her name is Rijita. She is 14-year-old 9th standard student. She was forcefully married to a private school teacher who is very suspicious, and she was sent to her in-laws' house where she was tortured and mistreated. She tried to commit suicide, and before that she wrote a letter to his father addressing, "Why did you allow me to get married so earlier, and don't allow her sister to get married?" So there are many Rajitas living still here. So we should fight for every Rajita not to happen it anymore. Now let's look into some social work interventions. Children's social workers help children, young people and their families when they are going out of difficult situations. Next is social workers' relationship with families. And they also create awareness on problems, especially during child marriage. Over to Shani.
Here I am talking about punishment for child marriage. Child marriage has declared illegal according to the provision of Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006. This law seeks to prevent solemnization of child marriage. It also includes prohibition of marriage between children below the age of 18 for a girl and the age of 21 for a boy. Whoever performs, conducts or directs in child marriage shall be punishable with simple imprisonment, which may extend to 3 months, and shall also be liable to fine unless he proves that he had reason to believe that the marriage was not a child marriage. Over to Gigi.
So let's continue.
Stop killing the childhood by child marriage and start educating your.
I am Aishwarya Tandal from the Department of Social Work, Christy Jain College. So we see that a lot of women face different kind of atrocities in the world. So one of these atrocities that the women face a lot is the desertion of women, or also known as deserted women. So these deserted women are known as castaways or throwaways, where they're either thrown out of their families forcefully or they step out from their families voluntarily. So there are certain causes for women who have been deserted. The first thing being said is dowry, which is said to be a main issue in our world today. So when the girl or her family is not able to give the required dowry to the in-laws place, and they're forced to give dowry, and when the girl is not willing to give this, that time she is said to be deserted out of her in-laws house. And the next thing is when the woman's husband is said to have extramarital affair. In that case also, the husband leaves her for another woman, and in this scenario also the woman is said to be deserted from her family. And the next thing is when the woman brings a lot of disgrace or spoils a family's reputation, That way also the woman is said to be thrown out of her family or cast away. Certain reasons for this could either be due to eloping or she having an intercaste marriage with another person. So in this case, the woman is said to be deserted from her family. The other scenario will be in certain places when a woman becomes a widow and the in-law is not planning to take care of her anymore. In that way also the woman is said to be thrown out of her family. The next thing we have is the roles that the social workers could do to help these women who are deserted. First thing is social workers spread awareness in communities regarding such deserted women, where they help the community to realize the existence of such women and how they could help them. The next thing is by giving counseling sessions to such women who are said to be mentally disturbed, by strengthening their mental health and giving them the necessary support and to face their consequences and failures. The next thing is also to advocate for such women, because not many take stand for such women since they are deserted or cast away from our society. So social workers can take stand for such women and help them in the needs that they require and also to conquer their rights. So in concluding, I would like to say a lot of deserted women still exist in our society. So it is required for us to help these women and support them in many ways that we could. Thank you.
Greetings for everyone. I am Diona Benny. This is Amala Sethi. We both are studying in Christi Jayanti College, Bangalore. We are MSW students. Today we are talking about child sexual abuse. First session is taken by Amala Sethi.
Child sexual abuse means a child who is sexually stimulated by the older person or an adolescent person. There are different forms of child sexual abuse. When a child is used for the sexual activity, or the child is used for the pornographic purpose, or child is used for the sexual exploration like genitals or the female nipples. The main places where the child sexual abuse is occurring in home, schools and other places where child labours are commonly seen. There are different effects of child sexual abuse. First one is post-traumatic stress, complex post-traumatic stress. Second one is depression, anxiety, and there is a possibility to the victimizing the same person in the further, like in adolescent period. According to global prevalence of child sexual abuse, says that 19.7% of child sexual is happening in male child, and around 7.9% of sexual abuse is happened in male child. About 30% of child sexual abuse is happening in the home by the parents like father, siblings, brother, uncle, etc. And 60% of child sexual abuse is happened by the friends of family or neighbors. And only 10% of child sexual abuse is happening from the strangers. And according to the Union Ministry of Women and Child Development says that from March 1st to 18 September in 2020, there are 30,000 of cases are reported.
The child sexual abuse crimes are the crimes against the children. The most important sad factor behind this is the child are getting abused because of their family members itself, uncle, brothers or father even. And my case study is about a 14-year-old girl. She's living in West Bengal, and she lost her mother at the age of 12. And after that, she and her father living alone in the house. In last 2 years, her father is sexually abused her repeatedly, and she get pregnant. And at this stage, the abortion is also not possible. So she decided to carry the baby. During the delivery time, some complications occurred, and she died. And her father became punished also. And what the social workers can do is the social workers can give pressure on the government authorities to formulate new policies or to introduce new acts against the protection of the children. And also the social workers can give counseling to the victims. They can speak to the victims and sit with him or her, and also the social worker can create pressure against the abusers. Thank you.
I'm Ritu and this is Irene. We both are pursuing a second year MSW from Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore. So we are here to give a small talk on the topic dowry-related violence. So dowry-related violence is a very serious problem that affects both women and girls. According to the UN Division for the Advancement of Women, dowry-related violence or harassment is defined as any act of violence or harassment associated with the giving or taking of dowry at any time during, after or before marriage. Dowry-related violence often increases when the husband or in-laws demand continuous payments and the bride's family is unable to do so. According to the Indian National Crime Records Bureau, around 7,621 dowry deaths have been reported in the year 2016. Even though the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961 prohibits the giving or taking of dowry, it is still prevalent in India. The value of dowry is generally linked to the social status of the family and it also commodifies women. The worth of women as human beings is equated to the value of dowry. Thus, dowry dehumanizes women. So now, Irene will be talking about a case study on this.
I'll be talking about a dowry death case that happened in the year 2018 in Chandigarh. The victim Naina was married for the past 1 year, and in spite of the fact of receiving dowry at the time of marriage, she used to be tortured, beaten up and assaulted by her husband and her husband's family. She had informed her family members about the way she was treated at her in-laws' place and warned them about if this treatment continued, she would end up her life. And few days before she ended up her life, her in-laws had demanded for 50,000 rupees in cash or a car. And then 1 week later, she committed suicide. Her family members filed a case against her in-laws, and the court sentenced 7 years of rigorous imprisonment for her husband and her mother-in-law. Through this case itself, we can understand the various levels of atrocities that have been committed against women. And as a social worker, few interventions that can be implemented is to give gender sensitization programs. In many states, there is dowry prohibition officer, which is normally taken up by a social worker. People and the society need to be aware about these officers, and they can seek these officers for legal advices as well as for counseling. And social workers can play a very vital role in schools, where from a very early age itself, both the genders are educated on how they need to respect and treat each gender with integrity and dignity. So in this way, social workers can play a really important role in reducing the cases of dowry in our country. Thank you.
Greetings everyone, myself Joshua David and this is Anania. We are students of Christu Jayanti College studying in the social work department, final years. We are going to talk about a very sensitive social evil that is existing in our society, which is female infanticide. Now, Anna will be talking a few descriptions and giving some details about this female infanticide that is existing in our society. Over to Anna.
Female infanticide is not just killing of a girl child. It's really a murder. Main reason for female infanticide is extreme poverty of a family. In a family, the family members feel that girl child is a burden for them. They cannot afford them. It is the main reason for female infanticide. There are so many acts for prevent this. One is that Female Infanticide Prevention Act on 1870. It's mainly for preventing female infanticide. And there is one more act in 1996, ban on ultrasound tests. It is also for preventing female infanticide. And there are so many schemes for preventing infanticide. First one is in 1991, Girl Child Protection Scheme is there. It's mainly for rural people. In a family there is a girl child, the government will give 2,000 rupees for that girl, and it will be releasing at the age of 20, and that 2,000 will be coming grow by 10,000 rupees, and it will be very helpful for that family. Like that, so many schemes are there for female infanticide. So many families feel that girl children are very burden for them. It's not really burden, it's really an asset for them.
Yes, indeed, there are a lot of cases that has been reported in our country regarding this female infanticide. Even in this time, it is really alarming and it's really shocking to see all these things. One of the recent cases that happened in February 20th, 2021 was in the state of Tamil Nadu, where a young girl child who was just 6 days old was brutally killed by her own grandmother. And another case which was reported in Telangana in the year 2017 was another incident where her own parents came up and killed that child just for the reason that she was a girl child. All these evils still exist in our society. What can we as social workers do to prevent this? Basically nothing much, but spread awareness about this female infanticide. Let us go ahead and move into the society and try to create an awareness against the patriarchal mindset that is there among the people in the society. Another thing that we can do is help the government and join together with the government in going ahead and creating more awareness and spreading out to people about the rules and all the regulations that is there in our nation, which is trying to prevent this type of atrocities against the young female children. So let us also, all these acts and all these schemes and all the activities that we can do together is just trying to emphasize on this one point, that girl children are not a burden, but they are an asset to the nation itself. Thank you.
Greetings everyone, I'm Carolyn Matthew and this is my friend Avinash. So we'll be presenting on the topic post-prostitution. So post-prostitution, it is also known as involuntary prostitution or sexual slavery. So it refers to conditions of control over a person by another person who is forced to engage in sexual activity. Post-prostitution, it is a crime against the person because of the violation of the victim's rights of movement through force and because of the commercial exploitation. So my friend will be discussing on a case study. Over to you, Avinash.
So in this presentation, we are going to present a case about a girl who is 18 years old, who is also uneducated, who lives in Mumbai, and her family is in the below poverty line, and she is also a single working woman in a trade. Because of some reasons, like the people who traffic this girl to a Bangalore, like by telling them like we'll get a job for you, and her ambition is to she wanted to lead a normal life with this economic certification. So we came up with the 4 causes which is mainly focused on the post-prostitution. One is the poverty or natural disasters and search for a better living. So basically these traffickers focus on the people who are really vulnerable. So actually the main focus is on the immigrants who is transferred from one country to another country because of the conflict in their politics, natural disaster and also economic deprivation. The displacement of the population will increase the emotional involvement in a certain community in the field, and also frequently they don't have any economical support to balance them, so this makes them a subject to abuse through trafficking. And the second one is post-prostitution generates huge profit for the pimps. According to the report submitted by the ILO, it's like the post-prostitution and the human trafficking is a $150 billion business. So the 2/3 of this money has come from the sexual exploitation and the post-prostitution. Human trafficking is the fastest growing chain network comparing to the other drug cartels. And the third one is women and children are easy targets. In some societies, because of the devaluation of the women and children, they are really vulnerable for trafficking. And actually, like they are also trafficked because they are needed more when comparing to the other women. According to the results submitted by the Equality, it's nearly 20.9 million women are being trafficked for each year because of the commercial and the sexual exploitation trade. And the fourth cause I'm going to talk about is the causes of post-prostitution and difficulty in identity. Actually, some challenges are there are many challenges in identifying the victims of the post-prostitution. Even though they're trying to identify themselves to the community, it's because of the trauma and the stigma that we're facing in the society makes them to. The fourth cause we are going to talk about is causes of post-prostitution are difficult to identify. Some challenges are identified victims of human trafficking are seriously traumatized and also highly ident themselves. Those who are traumatized are unlikely to divulge the information to the crime or police because they don't want to reveal their identity. Because of their identity, the family and the society came to know that they are in this business. Both traffickers and consumers are aware of the huge risk that in the sexual exploitation, and because of the illegal behavior, they are best to cover up with the illicit activities. And how this forced prostitution is impact on the women. So first one, prostitution can be harmful to the women in both the mental and physical health. So one small study shows that 130. So next slide is about how this forced prostitution make an impact on women. The first one is that it is a threat to mental and physical health. So one small study along with the 130 prostitutes shows that 68% of the prostitutes deal with the PTSD. Means post-traumatic stress disorder. It is same as the range of the combat veterans and the victims of the torture. And the second one is rape, physical and sexual abuse. Even though prostitution is illegal and these women are always welcome to report such crimes to the police station. Women in prostitution have the right to report this crime, but still because of the trauma in the society, they are being they have a fear that no one will believe them, what will the family will think about them, and also what the society used to think about them. Because of this, they used to still be working as a prostitute. And the third one is violence characterized by the power and control. And the third one is violence characterized by the power and control. Prostitute women are the victims of the violence and violence because of the power and control. The methods that are used by the pimps and the other customers are such as physical violence, sexual assault, exploitation, isolation, verbal abuse, and etc. Women in prostitution have high death rate compared to the women in the normal areas. The third impact is the women characterized by the power and control. Prostitute women are victims of the violence such as physical violence, sexual assault, economic abuse and manipulation, isolation, threats and intimidation. Women in the prostitutes have higher threats of that comparing to the women in the normal areas. And over to Karen.
Moving on to the role of social worker on forced prostitution. So the first role is he or she can act as an educator. So in this, he can educate the people who are under forced prostitution. That means he can educate them on their needed resources, or else they have certain rights. And the same role is as an advocate. So he can manage the people who are under forced prostitution, and also he can act as a case manager, and also he can help them on the treatment of the victims. So as professional social workers, we should be able to help the people under forced prostitution. Thank you.
Thank you.
To everyone. We are the MSW students from Christianity College. Myself Sebastian, this is Archana and Sebin. Today we'll be speaking about marital abortion. Handing over to Sebin.
Abortion is the ending of pregnancy by removal of an embryo of fetus. A total of 15.6 million abortions have taken place across India. Overall, 12.7 million, approximately 81% abortions were medicational abortion. 2.2 billion, around 14% were surgical, and 0.8 million, around 5% were through other methods, probably unsafe. According to the studies in Mumbai and Chennai, indicated abortions were higher than thought. The decision for taking abortions is generally decided for many reasons. According to the research, 40% of women says they are not physically or mentally prepared. 30% of women says they don't want the pregnancy because of bad timing and they are not ready for, and also it's an unplanned one. Another 31% says they don't want the pregnancy because due to the partner-related problems, including the relationship is not good with the partner and she doesn't want the pregnancy. And 29% says they don't want the pregnancy because they couldn't focus on the rest of the children. Around 90% says they don't want the pregnancy because they are not emotionally or mentally prepared. The rest of 12% says due to the health-related problems, including the health of their own or using the prescription or non-prescription drugs, alcohol or tobacco.
Now I shall talk about the legal aspects of marital abortion. The Government of India set up a committee in 1966 to examine the abortion legislation, and the committee recommended the revisation of Indian Penal Code of 1960, which treated abortion as a criminal offence. And in 1971, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act was introduced by Indian Parliament, and it was implemented in the year 1972. Thank you.
As a professional social workers, what we do. First one is post-abortion counseling. Contraception is discussed in together with post-abortion counseling. Although it is recognized that discussion of these issues will often from part of abortion evaluation. Education and advice take place before abortion. It seems too sensible that they should be reinforced immediately after the operation and perhaps also at later follow-up. To provide evidence-based recommendations on safety and effectiveness of abortion medications for the clinical management, abortion as well as the satisfaction of users. Offer counseling. Counseling is focused on interactive process through which one voluntarily receives support and additionally intermediation. As a social worker, we have to communicate information as in simple language, maintain privacy and confidentiality at the time of counseling, providing emotional support if needed, and follow-up care like routine follow-up is not necessary. Following as an uncomplicated surgical or medical abortion, however, an optional follow-up visit. 40 days after the procedure may be offered to further emotional support or to access any medical concerns. We have to ask the family members about a routine follow-up. Visit is recommended only in the case of medical abortion using mifepristone alone to access success of abortion.
Conclusion. According to national statistics, around 10% of women undergoing induced abortion suffer from immediate complications, of which 2% were considered major. In study of a post-abortion patient, it was found that 44% of women suffer from nervous disorder, 36% had experienced like sleep disorders, and 31% as a regression about the decision they made. Thank you.
Greetings to all. My name is Ira Teresa Joy and she is Anne Maria Joseph. We are the students of second year MSW of Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore. Today we are talking about domestic violence. Let me start with a beautiful quote that says, "You can tell who the strong women are. They are the ones who see building one another up instead of teaching each other down." Domestic violence may be a sort of abuse that happens within the house itself. And a typical image of violence involves a man perpetrator and a female victim, often his wife or his girlfriend. However, there are also the woman perpetrator of violence and men are sometimes become the victims. It can be of any forms, such as the destruction of property, psychological and emotional abuse, physical and sexual abuse and all. The statistics also shows that about 86% of the women are expected to domestic violence and never sought help. And 77% of the victims do not even mention this incident to anyone. And this recent studies also shows that due to this COVID crisis, this led to a sense of tension in many households due to unemployment. And as a result of this, many men are venting out their frustrations to the women.
And now we can talk about the types of violence. Over to Anne.
So the main types of domestic violence is, first one is physical abuse. Physical abuse is say cases of injury by another person, for example hitting, beating, slapping. Next one is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is a difficult aspect of domestic violence. Sexual abuse can happen to men or women in any age. This is the main issues in a domestic violence. Third one is emotional abuse. Mental or emotional abuse were most common issues in every married relationship. And the fourth one is psychological abuse. The psychological abuse can lead to anxiety, fear, depression, stress. It is based on our mood change. It includes mental issues of the partner. Fifth one is economic abuse. It is the very common issues of the family. Then over to Ayana.
Let me share a small case history. After an argument with her husband, a 24-year-old young woman who set herself on fire in her house. She received 80% of burns and she only because he straightened with her husband and his in-laws. Some causes are, if their children are exposed to domestic violence, they may have mental, physical and health problems also. Emotional
changes may occur, behavioral problems also occur to those children who are exposed or experienced with domestic violences. Over to Anne.
Now we can look at the role of social worker. First one is give awareness to public. For example, protection of women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. Second one is social worker should be able to support and advocate for the victims. Then third one is social worker to make people awareness of negative impact and effect of domestic violence in society. So let's stand together to create a peaceful place to live. Thank you.
My name is Jessin and this is my friend Manisha. We are from Department of Social Work, Christi Jayanti College. We will be speaking about violence associated to pregnancy. So what is violence associated to pregnancy? It is a form of intimate part of violence and it can be categorized as abusive behavior depending upon the severity and the frequency of the abuse, which can be a verbal, emotional abuse, physical abuse, like hitting or hurting through their communication and so on. And what are the causes of these violence associated to pregnancy are? It can be based on the anger towards the unborn child, thinking that the wife has cheated on him and the child is someone else. Then due to the jealousy, that the attention towards the husband might be shifted to the unborn child, maybe due to stress, that they will not be financially able to help or they will not be financially stable. They are not financially stable enough to take care of the child. So the effects and the interventions will be taken by Manisha.
So many women are happy.
Start.
So many women are happy about their pregnancy, but some aren't, as because of the violence that they face during the pregnancy from their partners. So mostly they worry about their ability to provide the kind of love and support that their baby needs, while at the same time they are also trying to keep themselves and the baby safe from their abuse. So the researchers have found that the domestic violence during pregnancy greatly increases the risk of early childbirth or low birth weight. So the low birth weight is a risk factor that may permanently affect the child's development. So speaking about low birth weight and early birth weights, this may also lead to problems such as difficulty in learning to walk or talk, and the child may also be born with their bones or any organs are damaged or broken. So speaking about the mothers, the mothers may also have increased stress due to the emotional abuses or any tortures they have experienced from the violences that they have faced. So they may also have some mental health issues when they face violence during their pregnancy. So when these effects So, in order to overcome all these effects, proper law should be implemented effectively against the perpetrators of this domestic violence. So, what we as social workers can do is like, the first and foremost thing is to create awareness about the laws or the referral services that are being existed till now to the mothers who are under the violence. We can also help the mothers to have proper medical care and to have safe houses. And we may also help them in getting legal counseling, as such they can come out of the torture or the abuses or the mental illness that they face due to the tortures. So we should stand together to make their voices rise out so that they get benefit out of it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Priya Singh and this is Anjana from Christi Jayanti College. We are social work students and today we'll be talking about marital rape. So, according to section 375, a man is said to commit rape only when without a woman's consent or against her will. But rape is rape regardless of the relationship between the victim and the rapist. It does not matter that the victim is a total stranger, your boyfriend, your husband or anybody. But the law denies the fact of marital rape. It says that if you are legally wed, forced sex is no more a crime. Sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife being under the age of 15, is not considered a rape, even if the woman is drastically affected physically or mentally. It does not count. There are the three reasons why the rape is conducted, why the marital rape happens. So, the three reasons depend on the factors like unstable factor, stable factor, and uncertain factor. First, obviously, the wife to be blamed. Like, she was raped in the past, she was unresponsive to the sex, she is not affectionate enough, or she refused to have sex when his man wants it. Secondly, it's a joint problem, it's a joint responsibility. Like, they are not compatible enough with each other, there is a communication gap, or the man does not respect his wife. Thirdly, the man is to be blamed. Like, he loves to have the forced sex, he is an alcoholic, he is a sex maniac, or he needs to prove his manhood. There is a huge difference between stranger rape and marital rape. Stranger rape is someone you don't know, so you don't have a doubt what's happening. But when it comes to marital rape, it is a person you know, a person you trust the most, the person you never thought will do it, and the person you love, you thought you loved. So when the marital rape happens, it kills you from inside, the trust breaks. So when it is the person you have entrusted your life to who rapes you, it's betrayal of very core of the trust. Now, next, Anjana will be talking about the laws.
Marital rape is still not criminalized in India. Marital rape is still not legalized in India. India is one of the 36 countries where still the marital rape is not criminalized. Marital rape violates the fundamental rights of humans, such as Article 14, right to equality, and Article 21, right to life. So in Article 21 being right to be the identity of the person, when woman is married, the identity is changed to the man and the right is being violated. So debates are rages over criminalizing rape in India, but there is no development till date. And on August 29, 2017, court said that criminalizing marital rape may destabilize the institution of marriage. So the people are more into being concerned about the institution of marriage than the emotional trauma the person is going through. So concluding, I would say Justice Verma Committee said that the achievement of empowerment and equality of women has to be a necessity, the conjoint effort of the individual and the state. Thank you.
Greetings to all. I am Maria. This is Mary. We are second year MSW students from Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore. Today we are going to speak a few words about sexual harassment of women in workplace. Merin will be giving a brief introduction about the topic.
Sexual harassment at workplace is considered violation of women's right to equality, life and liberty. It creates an insecure and holistic work environment which discourages women's participation in work, thereby adversely affecting their social and economic empowerment and the goal of inclusive growth. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome sexually determined behavior which can be directly or by implication, which includes physical contact and advances, or a demand or request for sexual favors which can be sexually colored remarks or showing pornography. It also includes unwelcome physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. Moving to brief statistics of India regarding this topic, approximately 72% of workplace sexual harassment of victims do not. Moving on to brief statistics of India regarding this topic, approximately 72% of workplace sexual harassment victims do not report the case to police stations or any other legal organization. 81% of women experience sexual harassment, and among this, most of them are harassed by their seniors in the organization. Now over to Margaret.
Here is a brief case study on sexual harassment of women in workplace. A young woman was given accommodation by her employer for a specific work. This accommodation was to be shared with a man where both had different rooms. When she woke up the next day, she found the old man was naked in her bedroom. She realized that she was sexually abused due to this. She was unable to take up her new job, and she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and depressive symptoms. The court assessed the case and checked whether the incident had occurred in the course of the man's employment, credibility of the woman, and to what extent the woman was injured. According to all this, the victim was provided compensation. Due to because of these cases, sexual harassment of women at workplace. According to all this, the victim was provided compensation. The law which talks about sexual harassment of women in workplace is the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition, Redressal Act 2013, which seeks to protect women from sexual harassment at workplace.
As social workers, we should be aware of the rights and laws which are provided by the Government of India regarding these cases. So when a case, as social workers, first of all, we should be aware of the rights and laws which are given by the Government of India. Therefore, we should provide details on these rights to the victims and their families. Moreover, we should not feel the woman. Moreover, we should not make the women feel left out. We should make them feel empowered, and we should give a feeling of confidence that they can come out of this and justice will be provided to them. Finally, we should make the women bold so that they can stand on their own feet. Thank you.
Greetings to all. My name is Rekha and this is Priyanka. We are from Christu Jayanti College, Master of Social Work. So we are talking about dowry-related abuse and murder topic. So what is dowry? It includes gifts, money, property given by the bride's father to ensure bride safety to her daughter. So when talking about dowry, we definitely have to talk about violence. So violence against women is largely seen in the forms in our country. So one of the example is dowry death. So dowry deaths are deaths of married women who are murdered because of the torture by their husbands, in-laws, and over the dispute of the dowry. And few examples and cases will be explained by Ganga. Over to you.
In 2016, number of dowry deaths in India was over 7.1 thousand. It has been steadily declining since 2014, of which this number was about 8.5 thousand. I want to share a case study of 24-year-old woman murdered in 2016 over dowry. Victim was married in 2015. At the time of wedding, her father gave a lot of money for as gift and dowry. Then her in-laws were dissatisfied with the dowry and forced them to bring more money. After continuous torture and harassment, her father gave washing machine and 2.5 lakh to the family. Then a month later, victim was beaten by her mother and admitted to hospital. Then her son-in-law informed her family that she committed suicide and it was a sudden death. Then her father reported that she had some marks on her body and that son-in-law had killed her for dowry. Then the case registered under section 304B dowry death, 498A dowry, then 120B criminal conspiracy of IPC against victim's husband, father-in-law, mother-in-law and sister-in-law and her husband. Then section 302 murder with a charge sheet. This is the case happened in Gurugram.
So this case reveals that there are a lot of factors such as illiterate, poverty, and this woman from lower class family who cannot afford the money to the bridegroom. And this is happening because they are not aware of the rules and laws, such as Example Dowry Provision Act 1961, Penalty for Demanding Dowry Section 4 Act, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. So the social work intervention that we can give is awareness on rights and laws for the woman, counseling, pre-marital and post-marital counseling, discourage the dowry infected marriage, make use of social media, then awareness through education. Thank you.
So hello, my name is Keris and this is Clary, and we'll be talking about female feticide. So to dive right in, female feticide is the act of bringing about the death of a female fetus. Now, many of us, when we come across an expectant couple, the first few questions we'll ask them is, are you having a boy or a girl? Or do you want a boy or a girl? And when many of them will express how they just want a healthy baby, there are still many of them who, coming from different walks of life, different religions, different economic statuses, who will state that they are actually wanting a baby boy. Now, the reasons for this is many. A few of them are, they believe that if you don't have a son, there's no one to perform the last rite rituals, there is no one to carry on the family name, and there is no one to take care of them when they are old. Now, when you have a girl child, they can do none of these things. In fact, they have to provide them with a dowry, which not many families can provide. And it's all for the sake that she'll be leaving this family and going into another family. To talk a little bit about the history, female feticide started becoming rampant during the early 20th century when affordable ultrasound scans started picking up. So many people, this was actually for the sake of confirming the health of the child. However, people by extension started finding out the gender and then aborting their children. So in the 1970s, many small clinics started encouraging people to determine the sex of their baby, and if it was a girl, to abort it. This is because people would have baby after baby in the hopes of having one son. So instead, what they started doing was determining the gender of the baby, and if it was found to be a girl, they would abort it. So Clary now will talk a little bit about the acts.
So with everything that has been mentioned, the government has taken its steps to tackle this issue. So it has propounded an act, and that is the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act, which was propounded in 1994. But this act was actually implemented only after a decade later, after the rigorous efforts and campaigning of women's rights organizations and public interest litigation. So this act was implemented in the year 2003, and it provides for the prohibition of sex determination and sex selection for all people in the country. So coming in after 18 years after the implementation of this act, the data has shown on the sex ratio at birth, which was collected from the civil registration system, and it showed an alarming fall over the years. So it has dropped to 877 girls for every 1,000 boys in the year 2016. So it was also seen that there are 5 states that have an SRB equal to or lower than 840, and these states are Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand and Tamil Nadu. So activists have pointed out that even though female infanticide have come down, but sex-selective abortion is still the preferred vehicle for parents and grandparents who are obsessed with son preference. When looking into the current scenario and with the implementation of this act, where are the drawbacks of this act? Why is this issue still rampant and still prevalent in the society? So one can say that this act oversimplifies a complex problem by placing the moral and legal onus only on the physicians alone, instead of placing them on the patients and parents who are committing female feticide and the families who are supporting them. So what do we as social workers have to do to tackle this? As social workers, we can utilize the social work method of social action to convince the government to amend this act and to give more stringent punishments, not only to the medical practitioners but to the parents as well. And we can always come up with awareness programs to educate the people to change, in order to change their attitudes and mindset for a desire for a male child. So our weapon now, not only for the government but for us, all the people in the society, is we have to come up with a very powerful weapon that is enough to eliminate the perversion of son preference from the people's minds. Thank you.
The atrocities committed against women in India is massive and widespread. It requires more attention from society and the government.